Good morning. We're excited to have you all here today. This class is going to talk about adding individuals in FamilySearch. We're going to cover how to add an individual from the tree view, how to add an individual from the person page, from a record hint, and also how to add an unconnected individual. So first off here, we are starting on the tree view page. This is the landscape version. And here, there are 4 places that you can add an individual. So you can see I'm right here. You can add an individual by clicking on any of these sections that say add spouse. So you could add a spouse, you can add a child, you can also add a father and a mother. And once I click on these, whichever one I pick, the page or the window that pops up is going to be the same, regardless of any of them. Oh, and there's also one other on this view here. If I click down this little arrow, you can also see you can add a child here or there. So there's a number of different options from this page that you can do. So we're going to just try one. And so I am going to add my father. And so I click that button and it pops up this window. And again, this is the same window that'll pop up regardless of which family member I try to add. And so I'm going to enter his information. He is deceased and his birth date was 1946 and he was born in Nebraska. And so on all of these, you want to pick the option that comes up, the preset option, so that the computer looks in the right places as you type. And then I'm going to click next. Okay, and so here the computer goes out into the tree and it sees what our options are. And so it gives me the information I entered here. And if he was a new person that wasn't in the tree, I could click this button here. But it also went out and it found him already in the tree, and it shows me his parents and his spouse and some more information so that I could make sure that I had the right individual. And so this is the right person, and so I'm going to go ahead and click add match. So again, this is going to match up to somebody that's already in the tree, not a brand new individual, but either way it will work. So I'm going to click add match, and then I can select him as a couple or select him as a person. In this case, he was married twice. So this individual, Nancy here, isn't my mother. So I don't want to pick the select couple option. I'm going to click the select person option. So I go ahead and click that. And then you can see that here in the tree, now he's showing up as my father because I did not pick the other individual, his other wife that was already in the tree. It does not add in his spouse. And then because he is deceased, it adds in all of his parent information and other information that was already in the tree. You can see here, just by adding that one individual, I get a lot of information because it hooks up to whatever's in the tree. If the person you're adding is a living individual, then it will just add that one person. The tree only shares deceased individuals between different accounts. So if you go in and let's say my mother is still living and I want to go in and add her by clicking here as add spouse, it will show up in my tree, but it will not show up in other people's tree. In order to hook into that shared tree, you need to enter people until you get to a deceased individual. So if I go in here, I'm just going to add in my mom. She is still living, so I'm not going to put any extra information in there. And here I'm going to create person. And so you can see it added her in, but because she's living, it doesn't share that information with the tree. And so I would need to go in here and add in my grandparents in order to get them to show up on my mother's side. The other way that you can search for people is that you could go in and you could, like I'm going to click here, I'm going to add in my grandfather on my mother's side. And so I'm going to click add father. And so this is that same window that we got before and where I entered the information. But in this case, I happen to know his ID number in the family tree. So everybody in the FamilySearch tree has a personal identification number. And so I have written his down. So I'm going to just switch over here to the top see, I can go back and forth between the name or between ID number. And so I am going to enter his code because I already know it, and click next. And it goes out into the tree here and it finds him. So that is the right person. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add match. And then because he was married multiple times, I need to pick which couple. And so this is the couple that is my grandparents. And so you can see here, if I close this one out and go over, because, when I added in my mother, because she was still living, it didn't connect into the tree. But when I've added in my grandparents who are deceased, it also filled in the information that the tree has for them. So that's two different ways you can do it. And then here, we are looking at things in the landscape view. It works similarly in the portrait view. So I'm just going to change over here to the portrait view, and you can see that now it has those people entered because I've already entered them. But it's a similar process. You can see here's her sister. The portrait view is not quite as user-friendly. It will still come up with the add spouse or the add parent, which you just can't see because I've already added them in here. But it is a little more difficult to add children in through the portrait view. So I find it's just easiest to go into the landscape view when you're adding individuals. Because the way that it displays makes it a little bit easier to go into and to do that. Okay, and you cannot add individuals. There's some other views here. So we talked about portrait and landscape, the fan chart, and the descendancy views, and the first ancestor. You can't add people into that tree. So that's a way that you can view your tree, but it is not how you can add people into your tree from the tree itself. So we've talked about those different pages. Okay, now I'm going to go in here and let's say that I want to add somebody in from the person page. So I'm going to go look at me, and I'm going to click here, which is my person page. And so this has information here up at the top, and you can see it has a note that I'm a living person. So it's going to behave a little bit differently. And this is just, my personal information. But if I scroll down here to where it says family members, you can see that you have almost the same buttons that you had in the pedigree and the portrait views. So I can click here and I can add spouse, or I can add children, the same as you could in that pedigree view. So if I want to go in here to add spouse, it comes back up to the ID number because that's what I used last. But if I click over here onto my name, you can see that window that we use to add people is the exact same, whether you're in one of the pedigree charts or whether you're in the person page. It all acts the exact same way once you click on that add button. I'm going to cancel this right here. Sometimes when you're adding in a child, you have a couple different options of how you want to do it. So for me here, I'm added under my dad and mom. And if I had siblings, you could click right here and do that. You also sometimes, let's say that I had if I entered my husband here, I could click our children. But if I had a different spouse, if I was married more than once, I could add that spouse in there and then add a child with them. Or sometimes you don't know who the mother might be. It's particularly happens more often with mothers than fathers because of the names. But let's say that you knew that this was the child of this person, but you didn't know who the mother was. In my case, because I'm female, it's showing unknown father. So you can attach a child to one individual in the relationship, but not as necessarily a child to that other person if you're not sure how the marriage works. And so I could go in here and again, it pops up that same window. So there's a couple different ways of how you can go in and add children, either when you know one of the parents or if you know two of the parents. So that gives you a little bit more options if you go into that person page as to how to add them in there. Okay, so here we are on this person page. And let's see, if you look up over here on the side, it gives you research help. You can also add individuals through that research help. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back up here to the top, and I want to find an individual that I know I can add that way since it's not gonna work for my account. So I'm entering that personal identification number. For somebody that I've looked into previously, and here's the individual. So I'm going to click on his name and I am going to go to his person page. And so you can see here that he has a lot of different research helps. The computer has gone out into the tree and it has found records or individuals that it thinks are either duplicates or apply to this person. And so the computer is giving you some hints. Now I've looked at this before, and so I am going to go in here to this particular record hint that I have researched. And here, as soon as it opens up here, I'm going to look at this and I believe that this is the same individual. So I am going to hit review and attach. And it takes me to this source linker page here. If you can see, it opened up a new window up at the top. So I can still go back into the person page where I was before, but when you're attaching a record, it opens up a new window so that you can see the information over here from the record on the left and information from the tree on the right. And so it says there's a few things that are different. It's an A versus an O in his name. But here you can see that it also, this record has him, his wife, and his child. And that's why, even though there's not a lot of information on John specifically, because of the information with these other relatives, I know that it's the same individual. And so I can attach the record here to his wife that is already showing in the tree, where I've got both family members, with the same information. I can be fairly confident that this is the same person. But because we're talking about adding new individuals today, I'm going to go down here and you can see that this record was for his daughter, Agnes. And so it lists her parents, but she is currently not in the tree as one of those children. And so I'm going to click add here. And so it opens up this window and it says that I can add her to this family. So she's already showing in this here with a John who's deceased and doesn't have very much information. But I want to add her as a child of John here, who we have some more information, and his wife, Bridget. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit select because I believe that's the right individual to add them. I could also hit create new person and go in and add it that way. So I have those two options, either somebody in the tree or a new person, as we talked about before. And so I go ahead and hit select, and I get a little message here saying that I've successfully added that relationship. And so now Agnes is showing as a daughter with these other children in the tree. And then if I hit attach here, so it created her as a new person, as a new child under John. And then the source that I use to add it, I can click right here and attach that source to Agnes. And I can click these purple buttons and attach that source to both of those parents as well. So that's how you can add it from a record hint. And then there is one other way that we want to show how to add individuals. And I also want to say that adding record hints into people is a future class. So there'll be some more details about that information in an upcoming class. But we did want to show you that piece about how to add individuals, since that's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to go back out here and I'm going to go to my tree. And I am going to pull up this person page here for my grandfather. Okay, and I'm going to show you the last way that you can add a person into the tree, which is an unconnected individual. So if I scroll down here, you can see that here's his parents and his siblings. He's married a number of times, and so he's got a number of different spouses. But if I scroll down here to the very bottom, I can add something that says other relationships. So in his case, I found him on the 1950 census, and it lists a woman that claims on the census to be his wife. Because of all this other research that I've done, I know for a fact that it is not his wife. So I don't want to add her as a spouse, but I do want to attach her to his tree because I know that they did have some kind of relationship. I'm just not sure what that relationship is. This also works really well if you have individuals, maybe you're researching and you think they might be an aunt or an uncle and you're not quite sure what that relationship is yet. Or perhaps if it's like an enslaved person and their enslaver, then you could add them this way, where it's not a traditional family relationship, but you do want to make that connection. So if I go in here, I'm going to click add other relationship, and you can choose what that relationship is. So at this point, I'm not sure. So I'm going to leave that blank for right now. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add person. And so the person that is listed on the census is Shirley B. Eldridge. She was a female. I'm not sure if she's living or deceased yet, so I'm going to click living. But also, because I'm clicking living, that means she's only going to show up in my tree and not in anybody else's tree. So based on the census, I know that she was born in, March of 1918. I'm going to click that preset option, that standardized option that it comes up with. And the census also says that she was born in Iowa. So I'm going to enter that information and then I'm going to click on next. And because she's living, it's not going to match up to anything in the tree. So it doesn't come up with an individual from the tree that it's found. But I'm going to click here and click create person. And here it says person successfully created. So that's why I don't have the option to save, because she's just been saved. And I can go ahead here and close this out. I just happened to see over in the chats here, we'll be getting to more questions in a minute, but I happened to see one about adoption out of the corner of my eye. And so I did want to just show you this really quickly here. If this Albert here is listed with his parents, but if those were maybe those are his biological parents, but if they were adopted, I could go in here and click this little pencil and I could change the relationship type. And so I could choose biological, foster, adoptive, any of those things that I want to do. So again, I look at the person page, I see Albert as a child. That's kind of the tricky part. And then I click that pencil there to edit the relationship type. So it can maintain a relationship, both biological and adopted, in the tree, so that you can choose between those kind of relationships and still differentiate between the types of relationships. And if I scroll down here to Albert, if you notice, this is the one important thing here. It doesn't show me the person that had another relationship. Let me see if I refresh it and see if it will come back. That Shirley B. Eldridge that I added into the tree can sometimes be hard to find because because of the unconnected relationship. The tree isn't quite sure how to do it. And so I can't find her in here this way. I can go up to the top. So when you're adding an unconnected individual, it's usually best to go ahead and write down that personal identification number. I can go in here to recents. Let's see if it will. Oh, and she's not even showing here. But I bet let's see if I enter. It is not coming up. So that's a great example of, let's see if I go into find. Because you add people in with as an unconnected individual, it doesn't track them well in the tree. And so you want to make sure that you enter or write down their identification number so that you can find them again. So I know that she was born in Iowa and it was 1918. So let me just go out here and see if I can find her again. How many is it giving me? It's giving me a lot. So that's a good example of how even if you add that person in, it's really hard to track them in the tree. I don't know if Tanner might have a better way to do that, or Janalee, but that is the one tricky thing about adding somebody with an unconnected relationship, is that the typical pedigree charts and things like that don't know how to track that relationship. And so even if you add them in there, it can be really easy to kind of get lost in that. So that is all I have on adding those individuals. So thank you for your attendance.